Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. When is a mass shooting not a mass shooting? When the white media decides that it's not. Okmulgee County, Oklahoma. Monday of this week, just 2 days ago, authorities with the Oklahoma Highway Patrol had issued a missing persons report for 2 teenage girls. Their names were Ivy Webster, age 14, and Brittany Brewer, age 16. The 2 girls were last seen at 1:22 a.m. in a little town called Henrietta, which is 50 miles south of Tulsa. The 2 girls were supposed to have been spending the weekend staying at the house of one of their classmates. The house that they were at belonged to a man named Jesse McFadden. He was their friend's stepfather. When the girls didn't come home on Sunday, the parents alerted the Oklahoma Highway Patrol. Jesse McFadden was a registered sex offender. He had been convicted of first-degree rape in 2003. He only got out of prison in 2020. But not surprisingly, McFadden was scheduled to go on trial on Monday to face charges of child pornography and soliciting sexual conduct/communication with a minor. When he didn't show for his trial, the judge issued a bench warrant for his arrest. Their first mistake was letting a guy who had already been convicted of first-degree rape and spent over 15 years in the can out on the streets on bail, but we know about genetic immunity from the law. Now, within hours of issuing that advisory, the authorities would soon find the bodies that very afternoon. The corpses of the 2 girls, along with McFadden, were found on a large rural property in Henrietta that Jesse McFadden owned. While exploring the crime scene, the police found other bodies. They found McFadden's wife, Holly McFadden, along with her children, Tiffany Guess, Michael Mayo, and Riley Allen, bringing the total death toll to 7. Holly's mother said that there were a number of red flags about Jesse McFadden, especially how controlling he was of his wife and the children, that he kept them under lock and key. The mother said that she had never trusted Jesse McFadden, calling him the ultimate con man. In fact, Holly's father had found information about Jesse McFadden's rape conviction. According to the mother, she said McFadden deceived Holly by telling her a story to explain away the sex offender charges. According to the mother, Jesse had a woman contact Holly claiming that she was the alleged victim and that it was all a mistake and that her parents brought charges against Jesse because they didn't like her being in a sexual relationship with him. After the mass murder was discovered, this female accomplice reached out to Holly's family and confessed that Jesse McFadden had paid her to call Holly and tell her that cover story. What also needs to be mentioned is that the latest charges that Jesse McFadden was about to have to face trial over were filed in 2017, while he was still in prison. You heard that right. This guy got hit with new charges while he was still in prison, serving time for the old ones. The charge was that while he was in prison for first-degree rape, he was also exchanging nude photos and videos with an underage girl, this while he was in prison. Holly's mother said that Jesse claimed the incriminating evidence had been found on another inmate's phone and that he had been falsely blamed for it, but that the charges had been dropped. The white media is now reporting that the underage victim of this 2017 violation has revealed that McFadden sent her a text message the night before the mass murder, which was also the night before he was set to go on trial for soliciting her. The text said, "I did exactly what I promised I would do when I got out. I got a marketing job making great money and was being advanced. Been there 2 years now and made a great life like I promised I would do with you." Then he wrote, "Now it's all gone. I told you I wouldn't go back. This is all on you for continuing this." No. Actually, it's on the racist color-coded injustice system for continuing this. This guy was in prison for first-degree rape. He had been charged with more sex crimes while he was still in prison serving time for the first offense. And then 3 years after these new charges were filed, he was let out of prison anyway. And for the last 3 years, he's been walking about the streets going about his life as if nothing had happened. And they're only just now getting around to putting him on trial? If he had been black, he would have been kept in jail without bond when those alleged messages were found because he had priors and they would have held him there pending the outcome of a verdict. These parole boards let killers and rapists walk not based on evidence or on any so-called expressions of remorse, but based on the color of their skin. And because the Jesse McFaddens of this world know that they can count on the law not applying to them, they just go on and do whatever they want to. By the way, the DA who was supposed to be handling McFadden's latest prosecution is a Republican. And that's important because for the longest time now, the white right media has been talking about what they call woke DAs, people who they say George Soros has funded to put them into office in Democratic cities. Fox News talking about how these woke DAs allow criminals to walk the streets freely and to commit crime after crime while they're out on bail because these woke DAs are soft on crime. We need to get some Republican DAs in there and get some law and order. Well, here you have a Republican prosecutor in a Republican county in a blood-red Republican state. And he allowed a convicted rapist to be let out walking the streets even though this guy had already been convicted of rape and he committed a second offense while he was behind bars. You have 6 innocent people murdered, at least 4 of them children, and yet I don't think Fox News is going to be making a big deal about this soft-on-crime prosecutor out there. Well, if the Democrats' DAs should be called woke prosecutors, then I guess we gotta start calling these Republican DAs joke prosecutors. Now, the authorities refuse to give any details about this mass killing in Okmulgee. In fact, the authorities are even refusing to say how the victims were killed. They won't even say what the cause of death was. But they don't have to. The family of the victims has spoken out and revealed that they were all shot. This was a mass shooting. But the police refuse to say that it was a mass shooting. And they're not the only ones. The white media is going way out of their way to avoid saying that this was a mass shooting. You look at all the headlines about this story. Not one of them says that it was a mass shooting. In fact, none of them even say that the victims were shot. Instead, you look at these headlines and all it says is that the victims were merely found dead. As if nobody knows what killed them. The white media reports that the bodies were simply found as if they died under mysterious circumstances, or as if the authorities have yet to determine how they died, when the truth is they already know how. And we see it in many other cases too, particularly shootings that take place in the suburbs or in rural areas, places where the population isn't black. It's as if the white media wants to push a narrative that gun crimes only happen in the inner city, certainly not in the suburbs or rural areas. If this mass shooting had happened in the inner city, all of the headlines would read, 7 people found dead of gunshot wounds. But in cases like this, they simply say, found dead. No mention of the gun at all, even though the families of the victims have confirmed that that was the cause of death. This is what you call color-coded coverage. The white media deliberately omitting critical information for the sake of preserving their narrative. When you read the articles, you find the same thing. Most of these stories about this crime make no mention of the fact that this rapist shot his victims to death. There's been a large number of mass shootings in this country this year, and this is another one. Everyone's talking about the one in Texas, and they should, but nobody's talking about this one, not as a mass shooting. But it is a mass shooting, except it's not being called one. So when we talk about the mass shootings that have taken place, this one's not going to be added to the list. It's going to be allowed to fall down the memory hole. This is what you call white media bias. When you see 6 innocent people gunned down by a convicted rapist, and all of the white media refuses to say that it was a shooting, when they mention it in every other case like this, that's how you know that there's a program at work. Now you're probably wondering, why am I making this the subject of today's briefing? Normally something like this wouldn't be mentioned until the crime report. Well, there's 2 reasons. First, racist Bill Maher was talking about black-on-black crime, and he made sure to mention Chicago. He wanted to make a big deal of it, and the white media echoed his racist sentiment. Now, being your black advocate, whenever somebody drags out that old talking point, I always make sure to do a quick check just to see if it's true or not. This last weekend in Chicago, there were 5 people killed in the entire city. 5 people in a city of nearly 3 million people. Now, what's the population of Okmulgee County, Oklahoma, where this happened? 36,900. But actually, even that's not accurate because this atrocity happened in a specific place called Henrietta, Oklahoma, which happens to be inside of Okmulgee. And what is Henrietta, Oklahoma's population? 5,630. And the population of the city of Chicago, a little under 2.7 million. So more people were murdered in that little hamlet that nobody had even heard of than in the nation's 3rd largest city. And yet Bill Maher and his other racist pals, who claim to be so concerned about black-on-black crime, will not mention this at all. Why is he not concerned about white-on-white crime? He says black people should be concerned about black-on-black crime, but Bill Maher's not concerned about white-on-white crime? Most of the mass murders in the U.S. are white-on-white crimes. That's a statistical fact. Bill Maher said that some black celebrities need to go and do some public service announcements and tell black people to stop the violence. Well, he should lead by example. Will Bill Maher or some other Z-list celebrity do some PSAs or do a march for peace to protest white-on-white gun violence? Of course not, because he never has and never will. It doesn't fit his anti-black narrative. The black-on-black crime canard is simply nothing more than a racist white supremacist talking point to push the lie that black people are somehow uniquely violent or conspicuously so. But when you look at what's going on in the white community, you find the exact same things going on, just it's never talked about. And as I've shown you with the white media's coverage of this latest massacre, that's by design. And by the way, that also includes YouTube, who has attacked my channel in the past for pointing this out. If you even say white-on-white crime, that's enough for YouTube to strike your channel or for them to try to terminate it altogether. No matter how many mass shootings take place, it's never racially pathologized as white-on-white crime. That's something you're not allowed to say. But there was also another reason that I chose this latest mass killing as the subject of today's briefing. I've mentioned this latest massacre happened in a place called Okmulgee, Oklahoma. And if that name sounds familiar to my viewers, it should, because you'll probably recall that it was just last October that I posted a crime report about another mass murder that took place in Okmulgee, Oklahoma. Now, in that instance, you'll recall that the accused is a salvage yard owner who has been charged with quadruple homicide, accused of killing 4 men who were allegedly on his property and then dismembering their bodies and dumping their remains in the river. And just as with Jesse McFadden, this other Okmulgee accused quadruple murderer also has priors, among which being that he shot a man 10 years ago when that man allegedly came on his property. He was allowed to plead out those charges. So there have been at least 2 particularly heinous mass killings in Okmulgee County in the last 7 months alone. Something is very rotten in the state of Oklahoma, but it's not something you'll hear Bill Maher, the prejudiced pothead, say a word about. Because it doesn't involve black people. Trump talked about American carnage and sending the army into Chicago. Well, Oklahoma's a red state. Shouldn't that state government be asking for all the federal help they can get? Shouldn't they be saying, well, send in the army if that's what it takes? Because clearly they need it. But of course, Trump doesn't care about this. The Republican Party doesn't care about it. Bill Maher doesn't care about it. And neither does Fox News. On a side note, Okmulgee County is only 50 miles away from Tulsa, where the Tulsa race massacre happened. But this is the reason that you need the black media, because we tell you the things the white media won't. We tell you about all these things long before the white media comes upon a story so big and egregious that they simply are forced to report on it. The white media tries to make you think that they tell you about all the mass shootings that take place in the U.S., but that's a lie. They only report on the ones that occur in public places like a school or a church or a grocery store or a movie theater or wherever else some Aryan with an AR-15 goes to commit their killings. And that's why I do the Friday Crime Report. It's a chronicle of all the crimes the white corporate media doesn't talk about because it would destroy their anti-black narrative. And as we see in this case, these rural rampages happen so often now that they're repeating themselves in the exact same places. Ohio's had more than a few, which I've documented here. Okmulgee County has had multiple tragedies like this. And the fact that I'm probably one of the very few who's actually going to put that these people were shot to death in the headline and the rest of the white media refuses to, that tells you everything you need to know about the so-called objectivity of the white media. And I've only seen a few websites, a few places that have mentioned that this latest mass murder is the second in 7 months. Most of the white media coverage about this massacre doesn't even mention that a similar incident happened just 7 months ago. 2 mass killings in the same place in a little over 6 months? Shouldn't that be headlines everywhere? But it's not. Why don't they care? The reason these mass murders and rural mass slayings keep happening in the same places over and over is because it's forbidden to talk about it. It is the refusal of the white media and racists like Bill Maher to broach this subject that ensures that it's going to go on and on, out of sight, out of mind. The goal for white supremacists like Bill Maher is to save face, not to save lives. So, while people are willfully allowing bigots to distract them with 5 fatalities out of a city of nearly 3 million, nobody's talking about the loss of 7 lives out of 5,600. Ordinarily, you might call this a crying shame. But in this case, it's a dying shame. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Frederick Dawkins, David Williams, David Green, Justin Marcus, and Mouse. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.